First, as always, I have a few announcements about our upcoming programs. On Monday, May 16th, we will hold our fourth forum of the 2010-2011 program year at the Palmer House Hilton Hotel. Our speaker will be Paul Ryan, U.S. Congressman from Wisconsin and Chairman of the House Budget Committee.
Thank you.
Chairman Ryan will discuss the nation's fiscal, monetary, and economic condition. This year's fifth night will take place on Tuesday, May 31st at the Shedd Aquarium. The evening will allow members and guests to tour the aquarium while enjoying an ongoing cocktail buffet. This promises to be a great event, and we encourage you to bring guests and age-appropriate children. Members will receive details and reservation information in the coming weeks. As always, all upcoming meetings are also listed on the club website. We are delighted to have Howard Schultz with us tonight and are looking forward to his remarks later in the program. If you did not have the chance to pick up Howard's New York Times bestseller, Onward, How Starbucks Fought for Its Life Without Losing Its Soul, copies of the book are available for purchase after the program just outside the ballroom in the foyer. Also, we hope you'll enjoy the Via coffee on your table. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the speakers table. As I call their names, I'll ask each to stand and remain standing until the introductions have been completed. Please hold your applause until all have been introduced. Beginning at my far left, John C. Leahy, Chairman, Solomon Cordwell Boones. Julie Smolyansky, President and CEO, Lifeway Foods, Inc. Gregory K. Jones, co-founding partner, the Edgewater Funds. Ivy Walker, Chief Executive Officer, Whittia. Jeffrey S. Aronin, Chairman and CEO, Paragon Pharmaceuticals. Patrick G. Ryan, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder, Incisive Technology. Susan Scher, former Assistant to President Obama, Chief of Staff to First Lady Michelle Obama. Terry D. Diamond, Chairman, Talon Asset Management. Barbara Gaines, Artistic Director, Chicago Shakespeare Theater. Byron D. Trott, Founding and Managing Partner, BDT Capital Partners, and Director of the Club. Gloria Scobie, Senior Vice President and Group Publisher, Crane Communications, Inc. Charles K. Bobrinskoy, Vice Chairman, Director of Research, Ariel Investments, and Director of the Club. Linda Johnson Rice, Chairman, Johnson Publishing Company, Inc., and Director of the Club. James S. Crown, President, Henry Crown and Company. David B. Spear, Chairman and CEO, Illinois Tool Works, Inc., and member of the Executive Committee. Kenneth C. Griffin, Founder and CEO, Citadel, LLC. Edgar D. Janata, Chairman, William Blair and Company, LLC, and past Chairman of the Club. And now to my far right, Sarah Beardsley, Publisher, Venus Zine. Mark S. Schulman, President, the Eli's Cheesecake Company. Sue Jin, Chairman and CEO, Flying Food Group, Inc., and Director of the Club. Charles Evans, President and CEO, Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, and Director of the Club. Claire A. Koneman, President, Financial Relations Board. Sean J. Conroy, Director, Grosvenor Capital Management, LP. Neil S. Zucker, President and CEO, Corporate Cleaning Services. Rohini Day, PhD, owner, founder, Vermilion Restaurant, Chicago and New York. Bryant L. Keel, founder and chairman, Potbelly Sandwich Works. Cameron S. Avery, of counsel, K&L Gates, LLP. Eileen S. Gordon, chairman and CEO, Corn Products International. James A. Gordon, founder and managing partner, the Edgewater Funds. Michael W. Farrow, Jr., chairman and CEO, Merrick Ventures, and nominating committee chair. John R. Edelson, President and CEO, William Blair and Company, LLC, and member of the Executive Committee. Miles D. White, Chairman and CEO, Abbott, and past chairman of the club. Melody Hobson, President, Ariel Investments, and first vice chairman of the club. Can we give applause to everyone? Thank you. And now, in compliance with the bylaws of the club, Michael W. Farrow, Jr., 2011-2012 Nominating Committee Chair, will present this year's nominating committee slate.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. On behalf of this year's nominating committee, I am pleased to present the following slate. As is the club's custom, I will present the complete slate before the vote is called. For chairman, David B. Spear, Chairman and CEO of Illinois Toolworks. That's so cool. That's very cool. For treasurer and second three-year term as a director, John R. Edelson, President and CEO, William Blair & Company. For secretary and one-year term as director, Patricia H. Besser, Managing Director, U.S. Trust, Bank of America, Private Wealth Management. For the Executive Committee, for a one-year term, Carol L. Bernick, Executive Chairman, the Alberto Culver Company. Kevin Willer, for a one-year term, CEO, Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center. Michael Tang, for a one-year term as director, as an executive committee, and a second three-year term as a director, Chief Executive Officer, National Material LP. Thomas Wilson, for the executive committee and a second three-year term as a director, Chairman, President, and CEO, Allstate Insurance Company. And, Michael Farrow. I wonder, a little self-voting there. For executive committee and a three-year term as a director. And the following are nominated for a three-year term as a director. Jeffrey Aronin, Chairman and CEO and founder, Paragon Pharmaceuticals. Kenneth Griffin, founder and CEO of Citadel LLC. Eileen Gordon, Chairman and CEO of Corn Products International. Jim Gray, founder and chairman of Options Express. David Harrow, Chief Investment Officer, International, Harris Associates. Joe Mansueto, Chairman, Morningstar. J.B. Pritzker, Managing Director, the Pritzker Group. Penny Pritzker, President and Chief Executive Officer, Pritzker Realty Group. William Wrigley Jr., President, Wrigley Management, Inc. And for a second three-year term as a director, the following are nominated. Antonio Gracias, Chief Executive Officer, Valor Equity Partners. Linda Johnson Rice, Chairman, Johnson Publishing Company. Larry Richmond, Chairman and CEO, The Private Bank. Bruce White, Chairman and CEO, White Lodging Services Corporation.
Thank you, Michael. I'd like now to have a motion for the adoption of this slate.
I move that the slate be adopted.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say yay. Yay. All those opposed? Thank you. The slate is approved. Thank you, Michael, and the nominating committee for bringing in such an excellent slate of candidates. And congratulations to you, David, for taking on the chairmanship. We also want to express our appreciation to those directors and officers who have served this year. We will now take our customary 10-minute break before we welcome our guest speaker. Tonight, we are delighted to welcome Howard Schultz, Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Starbucks Corporation. The man who built Starbucks from a single storefront coffee bean seller to the worldwide phenomenon it is today. With over 17,000 stores in 50 countries, Starbucks has become an icon of modern culture, bringing consumers an appreciation for fine coffee and a new language to accompany it. How many of you this morning started your day with the Starbucks? Howard's story is riveting in a Hollywood movie kind of a way. He grew up in the housing projects of Brooklyn and was the first member of his family to attend college, having earned a football scholarship from Northern Michigan University. Post-college, while working as a salesman for a coffee machine maker, he decided to pay a visit to a coffee shop in Seattle that was buying a remarkable number of its machines. Howard describes walking into Starbucks that day in 1981 as coming home. A year later, he joined the company as director of marketing. At the time, Starbucks did not actually sell beverages, only whole bean coffee, tea, and spices. Later, during a trip to Italy, Howard was inspired to pursue the romance of the coffee house. He returned, urging Starbucks to sell prepared drinks. When the owners resisted, he left the company to open up his own coffee shop focused on recreating the sense of community that he felt in Italy. In 1987, Howard raised the money to purchase Starbucks, and the modern marvel we know today was born. As many know, Starbucks boasted astronomical growth for nearly 2 decades. Howard says his model for expansion was McDonald's, a company near and dear to me and many others in the room. While Starbucks chose not to franchise like McDonald's, the company emulated a similar commitment to quality and service. At the same time, it broke the mold. Howard pursued novel business practices like opening shops in remarkably close proximity to cut wait times. He even shunned traditional advertising. And yet the company's ubiquitous white cup bearing that all-too-familiar green mermaid is found in the clutches of millions every day, from morning commuters to movie stars. Most remarkable is Starbucks' unwavering commitment to corporate and social responsibility. Employees are called partners, and as little as 20 hours a week entitles them to stock options and full health care benefits. Part of this egalitarianism results from Howard's own childhood experience. As some know, when he was 7 years old, his father was laid off as a delivery truck driver after being injured on the job. Without workers' compensation or health insurance, the family really struggled. As a result of this trauma, when he started Starbucks, he vowed that that would never happen to his people. But David cannot become Goliath without suffering a few slingshots along the way. The Great Recession brought hardships for almost everyone, and Starbucks was not unscathed. As individuals and the global economy suffered, the long-haired green siren became an unwilling symbol of overconsumption and excess. Sales stumbled, and the stock price plummeted. Back in 2000, Howard had stepped down from CEO to focus on global expansion. But at the beginning of 2008, the board brought him back to lead the company out of its troubled state. He cut costs, closed 900 stores, and shifted the company's focus from expansion to the consumer. Under Howard's leadership, all 135,000 baristas were retrained in the art of espresso making, while company stores were literally closed down for the day. 10,000 store managers were brought to New Orleans for a leadership conference that would not only reawaken their passion and commitment to the brand, but bring millions of dollars and thousands of hours of community service into the city devastated by Hurricane Katrina. A rewards program was implemented to drive return visits, and last but not least, Starbucks' 20-year-in-the-making instant coffee product known as Via was an instant hit. This year, Starbucks is celebrating its 40th anniversary with record financial results and extraordinarily good press. With revenues closing in on $11 billion and a stock price nearing all-time highs, the company now serves more than 50 million customers a week. Why does it work? Howard insists he's not in the coffee business serving people, he's in the people business serving coffee. Beyond visiting his stores, Howard has yet another reason to come to Chicago regularly. He just joined the Groupon board. He is married to Sherry Schultz, and together they have 2 children, one of whom will be married this fall. Howard brought a video with him to show us a bit more. Please take a look at the screen.
No company is immune from the impact of the recession, not even the one-time darling of Wall Street, Starbucks.
After 37 years of growth, Starbucks is struggling to put the Mo back in its joke.
The number one threat facing America, Starbucks.
Good for a cup of coffee if they want you to buy a sandwich and a book and a DVD.
In a memo to his top executives, Howard Schultz admitted changes have led to a dilution of the experience and a loss of the romance and theater of Starbucks, opening the door to competitors. This must be eradicated.
Yesterday, it was concluded that I would be coming back as Chief Executive Officer. I can see the light. I know what we have to do. We have to show up. We have to do the work. And what doing the work means is that we have to find answers to tough problems. I apologize if anyone in this room feels that we have fractured the culture and values of the company by what has happened over the last few weeks. It's a decision that we had to make. Together, we have to turn this page. We have to go forward. We want to go back to what we really stand for. And we want to provide our customers and our people a sense of pride and confidence in the authenticity of the Starbucks experience.
We have a lot of work to do, but our research tells us we're making real progress on every measure of customer satisfaction.
There'll be more stores in the next year that'll be very, very different, but much more exciting and obviously much more relevant than the stores we built 10 years ago. Starbucks' best days, I truly believe, are in front of us. We have some of the finest people in the world serving our coffee in our stores. We are ethically sourcing the highest quality coffee in the world. I know that to be true. We have built one of the most recognized and respected brands in the world. And I believe sincerely in the future of our company because I believe in all of you.
Please help me welcome one of the most successful entrepreneurs of our time, humanist, activist, and king of the bean, Howard Schultz.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. This is very intimidating, I got to tell you. Let me begin by thanking the Economic Club of Chicago for inviting me here. I'm honored, and it's a real privilege. John, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I also want to acknowledge Melody Hobson, a good friend of mine, and someone who's been on the Starbucks board, has added so much value to the company over many years. So thank you both very much. I'd like to have a conversation tonight, and that's why I'm on a stool, as opposed to trying to give some formal speech. And what John did not mention in his very nice, elegant introduction is that there were significant self-induced mistakes that we made. So let me begin by saying that for about 15 consecutive years, we were on this literally magical carpet ride. And everything we touched since 1992 as a public company, almost everything, every city, every product, every country, it was as if everything we did just turned to gold. And when I left as CEO in the year 2000, we were really involved in hyper growth. And I stand before you, as I've written in the book, to share with you with great honesty and truth that those self-induced mistakes in many ways was about success and growth, covering up issues that we should have seen. And if I'm really honest with you, which I want to be, I would say that in a way a virus and then a cancer somehow became engaged in the company. And it was two things. It was one, not by design, and there's no one to blame. And even though I was not the CEO at the time, as a chairman, I was as culpable as anyone else because I wasn't paying as close attention as I should have. But in a way, we became almost linked like an albatross to the PE, the growth rate, and ultimately the stock price. And I would loosely describe it as being somewhat complicit with the expectations that Wall Street had of us. Now, we were never in a board meeting, and we were never in a management team meeting talking about these things, trying to make decisions for the stock price or the street. But somehow along the way, we lost focus on our core purpose. And I think you need to go back to the beginning and understand what our core purpose was. We set out to build a very different kind of company, a company that would achieve the fragile balance between profitability and a social conscience. And as John said, part of that was Starbucks was the first company in the United States to provide comprehensive health insurance and equity in the form of stock options to every single employee in the company, including those who were part-time. And I think we felt long before we were a public company that in order to build real, sustainable, enduring long-term value for the shareholders, since we were such a people business, we had to link shareholder value to value for our people. And unlike almost any other consumer brand that you can look at, Starbucks did not build its brand through advertising or traditional marketing because we didn't have any money. In fact, the brand was built almost quintessentially by the experience that occurred in our stores. And that came to life based on the relationship that we had with our people. And we said early on in the imprinting stages of the company, if we want to exceed the expectations of our customers, the only way we could do that as leaders and as managers was to exceed the expectations of our people first. And that is what drove us. Now, I came back to the company not because it was planned and there was never any intent. In February of 2007, I began to kind of smell what was going on. And even though the stock price did not reflect it and our business was strong, I could just sense that things were not the way they should have been. And I wrote an internal memo. I've written hundreds of memos. But on February 14th, Valentine's Day 2007, I wrote an email to the leadership team and the CEO, and it was a heartfelt memo about my concern. It was not to criticize, it wasn't to point fingers, it was to remind people about the soul of the business. A few days after the memo was written, and it was entitled The Commoditization of Starbucks, there was a knock on my door, and for the next few days my world was upside down because someone leaked the memo. And all of a sudden, the blogosphere, the media, the street, competitors, customers were talking about this memo as if it was an indictment on the leadership team and the CEO. It was never intended to be that. From that memo, it was a catalyst for conversation, for honest conversation, transparent conversation. And there was tension associated with it between me and the team, the board, everyone engaged in what was going on. And as a result of that, over the next few months, it became clear that the situation was going to get worse. And I returned in January of 2008 as the Chief Executive Officer of the company. One of the questions I've been asked on this book tour, and I've been to 8 cities, is what made you come back? And I want to introduce 2 words to you that are not generally used in business. One is love. I love this company as much as I love my family. There isn't anything, not one thing, I would be unwilling to do to defend it, to enhance it, to preserve it, to build it. And I came back because of my love of the company and the responsibility to 200,000 people and their families who were relying on our leadership to save Starbucks. The second word is humanity. Every decision we've tried to make over the years is through the lens of humanity, trying to preserve the integrity, the values, the guiding principles, and the mission statement of the company. And I just thought that was being compromised by a number of issues. And I would say if I had to boil it down, I'd boil it down like this. Somewhere along the way, we began to measure and reward the wrong thing. Sales per hour, transactions per hour, sales per week. And we forgot that our core purpose was always to exceed the expectations of our people and our customers. And so when I came back and started really looking at the issues, this was really before the cataclysmic financial crisis, almost every question I was asking and every rock I was turning over seemed to be worse than I had thought. When I examined the integrity and the quality of what we were doing behind the counter, I just thought that somewhere along the line, the speed of service and the transactions that we're measuring somehow compromised and diluted the integrity of a perfect shot of espresso or steamed milk made the right way. And I and the team made a very unorthodox decision. And I think this is a very important point. The decision we made was we were not good enough. And in fact, the tradition and heritage of the company had been compromised. And the unorthodox decision, I don't know if any other national retail company has ever done it before, was to close every store for retraining. Now, we knew when we made that announcement that our competition was just going to smell blood, especially the big company here. And they were starting to put billboards up on a national basis that $4 is dumb. And we had another company in Boston called Dunkin' Donuts that said, this is a time to go after Starbucks. And we had independents like Cafe Intelligentsia and others who had gone to school with us, and all of a sudden we were being pushed to the middle. But the truth was that if we did not get back to the core purpose of the company with a comprehensive commitment to quality, we couldn't turn it around. So we closed every store and retrained 115,000 people and took all the bullets that came from everybody. Media, the street, competition, customers, even some employees. And the word was out. Starbucks' best days are over. The bloom is off the rose. They are no longer relevant. So what do? The most important person in all of Starbucks is not Howard Schultz or the senior team. It's the store manager. So we got together and we said, we've got to get our store managers to one place and talk about what's really going on and give them new tools and new resources. So how do you bring 11,000 people to one place? And then someone gave me the cost, $32.5 million, at the height of the cataclysmic financial crisis. Now, this was a time that almost every company we can remember had shut down travel. So once we announced that we were going to have this meeting, almost every major municipality in the country, including Chicago, wanted this meeting. And we had a bake-off of 6 municipalities. When the third one walked in the room with a marching band, I knew this is where we're going. And we went to New Orleans. But it wasn't the music. It was the like-minded values that they shared with us and the calling that I knew we had to do, which was before we did 1 minute of our meeting. As John mentioned in his introduction, we committed 50,000 hours of community service, mostly to the people who had been left behind in the 9th Ward from Katrina. And then we had our meeting. Now, in that meeting, I was preparing an outline of what I was going to say, and I showed it to a few of my colleagues. And there was grave concern. And they said something like, Howard, you just can't share this level of concern. You're going to really frighten people. They're going to lose hope. And I just thought, the only way that we could transform Starbucks is not compromise on the truth. That these are mature people, and they need to have the same information we have. And there was no way that I thought we could literally turn the company around unless they individually and collectively understood how desperate the situation was. And we were about to lose about $21 billion in market value in this year. And our stock was now hitting, I think, $9 or $10 at that time. It was tough. So we had the meeting, and in front of 11,000 people, I spoke the truth. And I told them that we could lose the company. I told them how tough this was, and this was not a time to in any way be a bystander. And I used being a bystander as a metaphor for a call to action. And it went something like this. How many times have you witnessed something in your store that you know in your heart is inconsistent with the quality, the heritage, the tradition of this company? Whatever it might be. And I'm here to tell you that we are in a position today where we cannot afford from this second on to lose one more customer. Second thing I said was, this is a time where everyone needs to understand what it means to take things personally. And as people know me, when I see someone holding another coffee cup and it's not ours, I want to tackle them. And I just felt like we were at such a lofty position and managing the company at 30,000 feet, that we're talking about 17,000 stores and millions of customers, and we forgot. It has never been about 17,000 stores. It was about one store, one extraordinary cup of coffee, one passionate partner, and everyone understanding that we're in business to exceed expectations. So it's time to take it personal. And the last thing was accountability. That we have to be personally accountable now. And don't do it for me. Don't do it for the company. Do it for yourself and your family. Because I'm here to tell you, if we don't, the very food on our table might be gone. That's how serious this is. And I can tell you, we left New Orleans for the first time in many, many months. I wouldn't say we had wind at our back, but I felt a little breeze. And we were galvanized to turn things around. Now, it's not enough to have passion and unbridled enthusiasm. It wasn't about a strategic plan. It wasn't about some transformational agenda. It was about heart. It was about commitment. It was about 11,000 people, and then 50,000 people, and then 100,000, and then 200,000 people, all faced in the same direction, with their oar in the water, leaving their ego at the door, doing something for the company because they wanted to be part of something larger than themselves. And people started believing. The board asked us to start modeling what the negative comps could go to. And as soon as we got to negative 15, because we were at negative 9 in New Orleans, we realized that we weren't going to make it. So we did have to make incredibly tough emotional decisions that would fracture the culture of the company if it wasn't done properly, with compassion. We had to lay people off and close stores for the first time in our life. And the night before we had to lay the people off, I asked for a list of all the people. And I went home and I studied every name. People that I've known for 5 years, 10 years, some 20. And I wanted just to make sure there was no politicizing. And I stood in front of the entire company and I cried and I apologized. And I just said, I'm so sorry we have to do this, but we have to save the company. I think what I learned was that this was such a big part of understanding what it means to be a leader. And I've read all the books about leadership, and you got to find your own skin in a way. You got to find who you are. I read all these books, and I think as men, we're taught to be strong and aggressive and macho and maybe not show emotion, but I can only be myself. And the emotion I tried to keep back, I couldn't. And I had to show people how much I cared, but how sorry I was. And I think it began to provide, even in the worst of times, a deep sensibility that people understood that I was making tough decisions based on the greater company, and these decisions had to be made. Now, I want to just switch from that moment to something else and talk about it in a macro sense. And that is, as we sit here today, we are witnessing the greatest seismic change in consumer behavior, I think, since the invention of the television. And it's happening on 3 fronts. And any company, small or large, consumer or industrial, that doesn't understand this and embraces the status quo as an operating principle, I think is going to find themselves with a collision course with time. And the 3 issues are the following. The first is the long tail of the downturn in the economy. And by that I mean that over the last 2 years, we are witness to a change in consumer behavior just based on the fact that people have less money. And as a result of having less money, they have changed the way they buy things, not only based on value, but just on just conserving. And whether the economy improves or not in the near or long term, I don't believe we're going to see a significant sea change and the light's going to go off with the consumer. And as a result of that, they're going to change their buying behavior. So I think every company needs to understand that there has to be a navigational way in which we present a value proposition for the customer. And it's very challenging for those companies like Starbucks that operate in a premium position, because we're trying to preserve our premium position while at the same time creating value. The second thing, and I think probably the most profound, is the unbelievable shift. And this is a train that has left the station in light speed, like a bullet train, in social and digital media. And I would say that traditional marketing, public relations, any way in which you've operated, the rules of engagement have changed so significantly with acute, unbelievable levels of seismic change. And the big change is that the sharing of information that's going on within social and digital media, from friend to friend, peer to peer, one to one, is changing the game so much because it's based on a trusting relationship in which I'm sharing something with you because I believe in it, I'm passionate about it, and I want you to know, as opposed to the last 50 years where corporations have been pushing and informing information to people, and they've responded. They're not responding anymore, and we don't have enough money as companies to break through all the noise and cynicism. The other thing I would say is that many companies are rushing to judgment with regard to social and digital media and making a mistake. And the rush to judgment is we are looking at it as a channel to sell stuff. And they're too smart. It's not a channel to sell things. It's a channel to share and build trust with people. Now, from time to time, you can go to that well, but you've got to make significant deposits in that reservoir as opposed to withdrawals. The third issue, and something that I don't think has been talked about enough, but it's real, it's tangible, and I think Starbucks is evidence of that, is that the consumer is so well informed, and although we may not want to agree, we have parity in the marketplace, we all do. There's competition everywhere. And the consumer is making decisions day in and day out, domestically and around the world, not only on features and benefits of a product or what things cost, but most importantly, the values, the integrity, and the ethics of the company. And I believe so strongly that those companies that are going to do the right thing, not for a press release, not to stand up on stage with a big check, but are deeply engaged in serving the communities and giving back, will win customers' loyalty in an enduring way because the customer wants to support those companies and products whose values are consistent with their own. Now, there's something else going on. I spoke about this at the 92nd Street Y in a speech I gave last week, and I got some criticism for that, but I'm going to try it again. I was in California last week, and I was told that the state of California is approaching $60 billion in debt. And someone informed me today that the state of Illinois is over $30 billion in debt. So if you take those two bookends, and we observe what happened in Wisconsin and Ohio in the last month, and you look at the insolvency and the deficits of what's going on around the country, there is a bad, bad storm coming. And that storm is that the legacy costs of the state's burden is not going to be met by their revenue. And there is major cuts coming in social services. Major. And then the question is, what does that mean for business? So here's the controversial statement. I've seen my career on a 30-year basis be blessed by the success of the company. And what is the secret sauce of Starbucks? We have no technology. We're buying and ethically sourcing the world's best coffee. But anyone, and for that matter, everyone, has opened up a coffee store. What has been the competitive advantage? And I believe so strongly as I sit here before you, and one of the primary reasons for the transformation has been our relationship with our people, the sense of humanity in the company. So the controversial statement is, I strongly believe that companies and corporations are going to have to do more. We're going to have to take care of our people in ways that we haven't in the past, and we're significantly going to have to face the realities of not turning our backs on the communities we serve, because the cuts that are coming at the federal and state level are going to shock us. And those companies, I strongly believe, that do the right thing will attract and retain great people, because people want to work for a company they believe in, they trust, and they're proud of. I also believe that customers will be profoundly loyal to the companies, the products and services that are showing up in the right way with authenticity. So I stand before you today on a 2.5-year journey, coming back to the company I love, realizing that success is not an entitlement. It has to be earned and earned every single day. The mistakes that we made in the past and navigating through the financial crisis have made us stronger. But I also think that the challenges that we're all going to have in the future is going to be significantly greater than they have in the past. And not because we're a people-based company, because I think we all are a people-based company, but we are the quintessential example that people make the difference. And over a 40-year history, the trust and confidence that we have built with our customers is based on the trust and confidence that we have built with our people. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Howard. As in our custom, we prepared a few questions for you from our questions committee. You've been extraordinarily successful as an entrepreneur, and just legendary. What about your upbringing that allowed you to have the skill set, and what did you learn along the way that helped prepare you to be such a success?
I answer that question sometimes, and I don't think people believe it. But growing up in Brooklyn in a very tough area, you're taught things that you're not taught in school. And it's survival skills. My high school had 5,700 students, 1,800 in the graduating class with 3 sessions. You had to get along. And you also had to find people who are stronger than you are to protect you. But I think as a kid, I had dreams that were beyond my station in life, but I also had then and have today fear of failure and insecurity. And those are scars that I think can't be covered up. And I think it has driven me beyond what people sometimes understand because of how competitive I can be. And I think that was imprinted in the schoolyards of Brooklyn.
Was there a teacher or a coach or your parents? What were the key influences that helped to guide you then?
My mother, I used the word relationship. Someone asked me this question. It's the wrong word, but my mother had this deep affection for John F. Kennedy. And it was almost as if he was speaking to her and gave her the belief that the aspirations and dreams that she had for her kids could come true because of JFK. I also remember when he was assassinated, what it was like in our house, because it was as if our closest relative had been killed. But my mother, who was not an educated woman, gave us this confidence that I don't know where she got it. She faked us out.
Great. You talked a lot about the importance of your team, and you have this, such an extraordinary group of people that have helped you to build the business. How do you attract top talent?
Yeah. Well, I should say something, and that is when I returned in January of 2008, I had about 11 direct reports. And within a few months, I realized that even though they had capability and experience, they didn't believe in the mission, and I don't think they believed in me. So 9 of the 11 were changed within 6 months. And I think the short answer to your question is, what I want more than anything else is people who have like-minded values. I think skill set and experience you could find, but can you find people who really have the values to do the right thing, to leave their ego at the door, and understand this is a team sport?
Well, you were an owner of a team sport when you owned an NBA team.
You're not bringing that up.
Oh, right. But only in the context, one of the things I find interesting is that when you try to build a team, you try to teach teamwork.
Right.
Do you think it's harder to do with a team of basketball players or a team of business executives?
John, you have no idea. You try asking Gary Payton to do something.
Right.
I'm definitely going to get in trouble for that. I don't think that an owner of a professional team, at least I couldn't do it, could have any effect on the culture and values of a professional sports team, unless that owner had had the team, as the Rooneys have had in Pittsburgh for 30, 40, 50 years, and it's imprinted. But a new owner coming in, no. I've never seen it.
But, a lot of us here as business leaders have tried to build teams. How do you do it? I mean, how do you coach it? How do you get people to really come together and then leave their ego outside the door?
I think that, as I said earlier, I don't think this is a prescription because everyone and every team is different. But there's no doubt in my mind that the only ongoing characteristic of a team is trust. And trust is not something that you could buy or invent. It comes with time. I also know that trust is something that can be fractured in seconds and not regained. And I have to know that I can trust these people at every level, and they can trust me. And I think you have to demonstrate that. I also think you must. Success is best when it's shared. It's shallow when it's based on one person or a few. And I think success has got to be shared, as the stage has got to be shared, and people need to see what's in it for them. And I think for us as a company, we need to put our feet in the shoes of our people and answer the question in the affirmative, what's in it for them? And people need to see, it's not the vision or the strategy. They need to see in it, what can I do as a result of the success of the company? Where do I see myself? And it must be vivid and clear that there's something in it for them where they're going to win. And I think you can't make false promises to people. And I think one of the things I've learned throughout this 2.5-year odyssey is there's nothing like the truth. Just the truth. And I was brutally honest so often, and I think it unnerved some people because it scared people.
The other thing that you've been extraordinarily good at is you have this amazing vision. You are able to see something for the whole industry that none of your competitors could see before. So where did you get that gift of vision?
Well, I think great entrepreneurs have the innate sense to see around corners and to anticipate what's coming or invent what might be coming. And then I think you have to have the courage to execute against that and be willing to fail. There's two big things in the book that I write about. One was a huge failure, and I owned it, which was Sorbetto. I was looking for a silver bullet throughout the transformation, and I realized there wasn't one thing that had created the problem, there wasn't going to be one thing that took us out. But I was searching for it. It wasn't going to happen. There was no silver bullet. But it also gave us the understanding and the discipline of how to do VIA. But VIA is a great case study, a $24 billion category that had not had any innovation in 50 years, dominated by one company. And when we announced that, people said, this is the death of Starbucks. This is going to dilute the brand. But we reinvented the category. That's going to be $1 billion business for us in a few years.
So we talked about the difficulties of teaching teamwork. Can you teach vision to your next group of leaders and future leaders?
I don't think you can teach height.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can teach vision. Okay. Going back to basketball.
Right. That's great. That's great.
But, the first page of the book opens up with everyone who's over 50 will know it immediately. But when I was 10 years old, my aunt took me into New York City for the first time. Radio City Music Hall. It was extraordinary. And then she took me to a restaurant. And it was a Horn and Hearted Automat. Do you remember that? And I was 10. And you put a dime or 15 cents at the time, and a piece of pie comes out. And I said, how did it come? Where is it? And she said, it's a magician. and I must have been 15. And I was telling people it's a magician. I said, man, this guy is nuts. But, at the end of the day, I'm a merchant. And that merchant mentality was born in that automat when I was 10, of telling a story, bringing a customer on a journey, and sweeping people away and making them feel better about the experience that you've created for them.
As the years have gone on, have there been other similar experiences that were transformative or people that had enormous influence on your career?
I've been friends with Mickey Drexler for 30 years, and who invented the Gap pretty much, was asked to leave the Gap and just did it again at J.Crew. I think he's America's best merchant. He's a genius. I've learned a lot from him. Jim Sinegal at Costco, the founder of Costco. It's a gift for me to have him in Seattle. I call him more often, he's sick of me. People like that.
Do you think going on the Groupon board, what do you think you'll learn there? How will that be helpful to you and your shareholders at Starbucks?
Well, I think given what I said about the seismic change in social and digital media, they are at the cutting edge, and to have a front row seat in that company I thought was just an unbelievable benefit for Starbucks. And I think given the growth of Starbucks and the fact that I was on the eBay board from day one, I think I've got some insight that perhaps could help them.
And then how do you, as you think about taking on that responsibility, and just talk about your day, how do you spend time with customers, employees, community, just how do you manage your typical day?
There is no typical day. I don't know, about you, but it's, first of all, I think the role and responsibility of a public CEO today has changed so dramatically in terms of responsibility and the issues that we all have to face. And I think because of technology, you can't shut it off. You go to bed with 50 unanswered emails and you wake up with 200. And so I just think it's a comprehensive day of lots of things going on. But I think the core of my day is spent trying to guide and kind of co-author the strategy of the company and working on the key areas of responsibility and sometimes a crisis. And then there's lots of things in which we're pushing for reinvention and self-renewal with regard to innovation. And we have to innovate. And I think also trying to take the company and people further than they think they can go. When we set out with VIA, I was told it was going to take 3 years. We don't have 3 years. We may lose the company before that time. You have 14 months. Now, what are the resources you need, and what are the roadblocks you have? And we did it in 14 months.
Well, as you think about the job as a public company CEO today, how did it change during that 8 years? Well, I know you were chairman and still engaged, but can you talk about the difference in how it feels now than it did when you were CEO in the past?
I know there's a lot of Wall Street people here. I think the fragile imbalance of trying to lead and build a company for the long term and trying to satisfy the expectations of the street, which is more short-term minded, I think is the greatest challenge for this public CEO today. And I think it's much, much different today than it was 10 years ago.
So you're suggesting that the analysts are more short-term oriented than ever, and I guess maybe part of this is I guess all the buy side too.
I think it's not one constituents within the street. I think a perfect example, which I wrote about in the book, is at the height of the crisis, my phone rang from an institutional shareholder who I've known for more than a decade. Good guy. And the conversation was about Starbucks cutting the health care benefit. We're going to spend about $250 million on health insurance this year. Mm-hmm. And he said, every company that I'm invested in is cutting the benefit. At a minimum, cutting it, some eliminating it. You have license to do it. You must do it. You have all the cover in the world. I said, you don't understand. The very essence of the fabric of the culture and values of the company is this benefit. I won't do it. And I don't think he understood, because his mentality was skewed towards maximizing value now.
Well, there were several questions from the question committee around that issue of how do you strike that right balance of pleasing shareholders in the short term and also being socially responsible and caring about your employees the way that you do.
I think that is the challenge we all have. That's the challenge that we have. I think when we look at the income statement of Starbucks and we're going through all this, it was an untouchable. And so once it's an untouchable, you've got to find it in other places, and you've got to be much more resourceful. I also think, as I said in my remarks, it's a very dangerous, slippery slope to start making decisions that you know are not in the interest long term for the company, the customer, and most importantly, your people. And it might satisfy a quarter, but in the end, it's not going to satisfy the company. And I think, there's such a, to attract and retain great people today, and I strongly believe this, we're going to have to do more. And I don't know what that's going to mean ultimately in terms of valuations, but I think there's going to be a shift because something's got to break. The government and the state and local, at the state and local level, are not going to be able to continue to support those services that have become part of our daily life.
Well, looking out long term, you guys are so unique at this, and most people are so short-term oriented. Talk about the vision you have for Starbucks 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the road. What will it look like? How will it be different? What product differences will we have?
Well, we are in the midst right now of really transforming the U.S. business and building. We want to build a very big, major consumer products business, not unlike Coke, Kellogg's, Pepsi, Kraft, and we think we can do it. Why? Well, first off, as far as we can identify, there's no consumer food brand that's been able to straddle both channels of distribution, national retail footprint and the grocery shop. But if you look at Via, it's a great case study. If we would have introduced Via primarily in grocery, it would have failed miserably because we would not have had the intimacy and the trust to create awareness and trial in our stores because of the relationship that our people have with the customer. We knew from day one that Via was going to grocery, but we had to validate it and build it in our stores first. Now Via is in 40,000 points of distribution outside of Starbucks. We believe very strongly that if we look at the category of food and beverage, that we can create food and beverage brands, sub-brands, as well as new categories in our stores, draft off of that success, and build a major CPG business. We've also said for the first time that we are curious about potentially small and or large acquisitions within that space. And then conversely, we have a long runway in terms of the international expansion, specifically China, India, and we only have 800 stores in Greater China, and we think those could be thousands. And we're not open in India yet. We will be open probably before the end of the calendar year.
So it sounds like you're sort of saying that the best days are ahead for you. There's lots of opportunity, a lot of runway.
I say that with humility, but yes.
What are the challenges to?
The challenges are enormous. I mean, the biggest challenge for all of us at Starbucks is how do you get big and stay small? Ubiquity is not a friend. People don't want to buy a product from a company that's 17,000 stores. They want to buy it from one store. So we have to personalize it at the local level. We have to be highly locally relevant in every store, every country. And we've got to find ways to kind of break through the noise and maintain our relevancy. And we got to understand that, again, we just had our record quarter. But human behavior is to relax and take a break. We're not taking a break. We're not taking a victory lap. We're not taking a bow. We're hungry and humble, but we realize that it's a challenging environment and we got to do our best work in front of us.
You know, I believe in thinking long term also as an investor, but we had a lot of questions around the short term headwinds of commodity prices.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people would like to hear about your thoughts about that.
Again, I've been criticized for saying this lately, but I'll just ask a rhetorical question, and that is, why is there all of a sudden record levels for almost every agricultural commodity at once? And there's a 19-year high now for coffee prices, in the last 19 years, highest it's been. And I'm talking to suppliers, and there's no supply problem. So I think that people have gotten together and invested in commodities, and artificially these prices are up and the consumer is going to suffer. And we as a company have to navigate through this, and it's challenging. But there's no supply-demand issue on high-grade Arabica coffee that Starbucks Coffee can identify. And we've been doing this for 40 years.
Wow. Well, that's good news for all of us. This is
it?
As we thinking about just changing gears a little bit, you talked earlier about the budget deficits in Illinois and California, and there's been a lot of conversations here at the Economic Club about the challenges that state governments face. as you think about your future, there's been talk about you taking on a public life and running for office. And
yeah. I don't see that public, to be honest with you. I think I've got enough challenges as it is. I don't really see that. I do feel that the administration has done a very good job, but there's more that needs to be done, especially for small businesses. Someone gave me a new statistic. I don't know if this is true, but if it is, it's scary. That there's only 11 million manufacturing jobs left in the United States, and there's 23 million people working for the government. Wow. That doesn't feel right to me. I think the burden on small businesses has to be addressed, and I think tax incentives for manufacturing jobs, significant tax incentives, where things have to be made again in America, and we need exports to, I think, build back the manufacturing base of the country.
So if you don't run for office,
John, I'm not running for office.
Okay. Well, here in Chicago, we do have a strong partnership of the business community and the political leadership, and we're quite proud of that, and community leadership. So as you think it through, what other ways can you sort of contribute to make a difference with your ideas, your vision, your ability to build teams? Are there ways that you can bring your gifts to bear to help us as a country to solve these problems?
I think the best thing we could do is create jobs. And we've created 160,000 jobs in America. And we're hiring again, which I think is a very good thing. I think if we can be any kind of voice or model for other companies without preaching or in any way saying we're better, we're all for it. But I really think it's fairly limited as to what we as business people can do to help shape the government. I think there's a lot of smart people trying to figure that out, but I think metaphorically, people in the government need to put their shoes in the feet of the people who are really suffering and understand these are major, major issues, major problems. And when I look at what happened this past week in terms of the government shutdown, the potential of that, I think it's so sad and so tragic. And it's not the America that I recognize.
Have you been able to work with getting your lieutenants, the people you believe in, I'm sure serve in a lot of activities and boards and nonprofits, have they been able to take your vision and ideas and export that to the organizations that they're involved in, and take the Starbucks magic and...
Well, I think we've had a lot of good people leave Starbucks over the years who are running other companies, but not as a general rule, no. And obviously, I don't want to see many people leave Starbucks.
But also they could if they're serving on a local nonprofit.
Oh, there's a lot. We're involved with every community, well, not every, many, many communities around the country in which there's such volunteerism from people and significant positions on national and local boards, for sure.
Terrific, terrific. And then just tell us about the work-life balance. You're doing so much for so many. You're building a worldwide brand. How do you've got kids and a wife?
I would say for the first 18 months of the transformation of Starbucks, I was quite out of balance. And I think the only way that could work is sitting down with my wife and getting her to understand what needed to be done and having her support it, because it couldn't be done any other way. And I think work-life balance is a very personal issue for all of us. But I think at the end of the day, you've got to have a partner who's doing it with you. And I think you've got to figure out a way to get away, to recharge yourself and understand that you can't do this 24/7 every day. It'll just kill you. And I think we've been able to do that, but I think having the kind of partner who really understands with great empathy what the situation is. And I've had that not only the last 2 years, but the last 28.
Well, I'd like to thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank you. I was just going to say, I think it's been an amazing evening. I've learned a lot personally, and I know that our Economic Club of Chicago has learned a lot from you and your vision and your values, which are so unique and important to our world and our country. So again, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Thank you.